welcome back. Hopefully we can get out there soon and enjoy some beautiful weather in Port Phillip Bay, like as on this beautiful day. Basically I'm just going to show you the discs now. This is what the disc looked like after it was sandblasted. So it still had the pitting on the surface, but it didn't have that crusty surface. So basically these were all sandblasted and brought directly to the brake place, and they were able to machine them. This is one of the old calipers, and how rusty they were. They were also sandblasted and brought back to new and painted as well. Alright, so now this is what the disc looks like after it has been machined, and I've put some paint on the inner faces so that the rust doesn't get to them as quickly. So you can just see I've taped them up and had those set up properly. Now also I have cleaned the inside with a wire wheel to remove any debris so it does not allow the bearing cup to stick. Now we ended up putting brand new bearings, and we had difficulty getting the bearings due to COVID and lockdown. They all had to be ordered online and delivered and picked up, and luckily we found the bearings because there is a shortage of things out there at the moment. Basically these are very heavy duty bearings, and what I'm doing there is showing you the inner part of the bearing, the cup, and the bearing itself. So what has to happen is I've got to put the cup itself inside the disc brake section itself. These are a very heavy duty bearing. They can hold over 3 tons. So they're not just your standard Holden or Ford bearing, they're actually truck bearings. So Matthew done some research on those, and they're a very high strength bearing. So in the next section, I'll actually show you how I put those cups in. I have a little 10-ton press to put bearings in and sleeves and that sort of thing. Now I bought this just as a cheapie, and what I'm trying to do here is put the new bearing in with a slot cut in the old bearing and use that as a spacer so I can push on it. But my little 10-ton press could not put enough force to push that bearing in place. And we had a lot of problems because it was COVID and we're all in lockdown, and I couldn't get anyone to use their press, bring it to a shop to use their press and get the bearings pushed in. So I had to resort to the old-fashioned method of doing it by hand, hammering them in. So you can actually see my press is maxed out at its 10-ton limit, and I could not get the bearing faces in, the cups in. So I'll show you now how I fixed that. You can see the slot cut in the old bearing, and what I did was lightly hammer in the cup, then basically I cut in the old cup a slot so it would just slide in. And what I'm doing here is I'm hammering it 3, 6, 9, 12, just lightly, not too hard, and it only pushes it in very slightly, probably 0.5 millimeter each hit. And that is just a really old-fashioned method of doing it. I probably wouldn't recommend it, but it took a bit of time. So you can actually see how I'm hitting in 4 sections of the drum, sometimes of the disc, and sometimes I'm actually rotating the disc itself. So we ended up getting it in. That film footage is sped up. It took nearly an hour to do both sides. So it was nearly an all-day session to do the 4 discs to get them in place. And you can see now I'm doing the front with a smaller bearing. Similar situation, hitting at 3, 6, 9, 12 and getting those bearings into place. So it did take a while to get those in, and I tried with a heavier hammer and I didn't have as much success as with the smaller hammer. The smaller hammer just provided enough weight just to move it very slightly, and it still worked. Now when the bearing is pushed all the way in, you can actually see the cup with the slot cut in it bounces back, and you can hear it ringing because it cannot move forward anymore, and that way there you know it's fully home. You've got to visually inspect it as well to make sure that the bearing is all the way home. All right, so that's both sides on one disc. Now we've done that by 4 times. All right, so that happened 4 times to get those bearing cups in place. Now what I'm about to do next is grease up the bearings. So what I'm using there is a waterproof grease, specially designed for underwater applications, for salt water and that sort of thing. High durability in salt water. So what I'm doing is putting grease on my hand, in the cup of my hand, and what that does is as you push the bearing, slide it against it, it forces it around all the rollers, and you keep rotating it and doing it until you have actually finished. So that happened by 4 times as well, right, for the large side, and 4 times for the little side. So that is 8 bearings. Then also we put the holder for the seal, and we lubed up that holder as well, hammered that in, lubed it up, and we put the seal on as well. So you'll actually see that happens by 4 times as well. Alright, so another thing you should always do as well is always wear gloves when handling grease and oil and that sort of thing. Sometimes I get a bit complacent and I don't do it, but the majority of the times I try to do it. So that is the outer for 4 sides, and you'll actually see in the next bit, oh here we go, arching. Archie was chucking laps, so I just took a bit of video of him. Alright, my little friend. Alright, so they're the smaller bearings for the fronts, and that was done 4 times as well, forcing the grease around the rollers. You must get the grease in around those rollers to ensure you get proper lubrication to all the bearings, and that will ensure longevity of the bearings as well. You get them fully greased up. Doesn't mean every couple of years you've got to replace them, right? Because they're not cheap items, they're expensive, but if you maintain them and keep re-greasing them like that, they will last you a long time. Right, so you can actually see I'm putting the seal, putting some grease on the seal, and then I place that inside the disc or on the axle, and then push it home. Alright, so you can actually see I've inserted that there. Now I've put the castle nut on with the washer. Washer first, then castle nut, and tighten that till the disc feels firm and it doesn't want to rotate. Then rotate it back a few times, and then back it off to the closest pinhole. Then put the split pin in. Now it cannot be tight, the disc. It's got to run smoothly still. And here I'm placing the bearing buddy over the top. And what that does is it allows you to grease the bearings as well and keep some lubrication up to the bearings. And it stops water ingress into the bearings itself. Join us on our next one, and we'll show you how we went with the installation of the calipers and brake lines. Thank you. Subscribe for our next video.